Hiring a project team. What I'm going to do today is to try to take you through the typical project and explain how it can be done with the least amount of pain and anguish on your part and on everybody's part, and be able to get a project done which will not only make you happy, but make everybody else on the project team happy and satisfied as well. So the first question that you always have to ask yourself is, should I remodel? Should I add on to my existing building? Should I build new, or should I just move? And all four of those options have been chosen once upon a time by many of my clients, and most of them, however, opt to usually remodel and add on to their existing house rather than build new or even move. So the question is, what do you need? That's the first question you have to ask yourself. Do you need more space in the building? Do you need a new kitchen? Do you need to remodel your bathroom? Do you need new wiring or electrical or plumbing? These are all questions that you need to answer before you even initiate a project. And then once you decided what you need, the next question should be, how big should it be? Should it be, if it's a family room, should it be a large family room? Should it be something that's modest, connected to your kitchen or connected to the living room perhaps? The fourth question, very, very important, is what's your budget? And we'll talk about budgets and the cost of doing all this as we progress through this presentation. And the last question that you need to ask yourself is, when do you need to have it finished? And this is currently, this is a very important question to ask because there are so many contractors that are extremely busy now. And what they tell me is, and I try to get them to bid on projects that are ongoing in my office, and they tell me that they're so busy because people have been at home and they look around, they decide, gosh, we should fix this up or do this to the house because we've never noticed it before, but we all of a sudden now we need that new kitchen, or we have more money because we're not commuting and we're not driving our cars much. So we have the budget that we didn't think we'd have before. So there's a lot of work that's going on out there, and there's unfortunately a limited number of contractors that are skilled enough to be able to do a house remodeling. You know, for 13 years, I used to work in a large architectural firm, and I did big buildings. And when I started my own firm, I went from doing big buildings to tiny little projects, which relate to houses for the most part. And doing a house, remodeling a house, is probably much more to me anyway, it's much more difficult than doing a large office building because there's so many little details that you have to attend to. So the question of all of these questions, what do you need, how big should it be, what is your budget, and how soon do you need it finished, are the starting points for your project. So should you renovate or rebuild? And as you can see here, this is a candidate for probably demolition, although I hate to say that because I can say just about any project, which I have in the past, and especially if it's a historic building, you really want to try to save it if you can, save as much of the original material that you can. So this is a kind of a comparison between a gut remodeling project, the two bars on the left, from the low of 100,000 to 200,000 to rebuilding new. And here you can see that the prices for rebuilding new are much higher than for even gut remodeling type projects. Now that doesn't mean that all projects cost this much. I added a 2 feet to a kitchen one time for a client, and it was something like, I don't know, $10,000 or something like that. So the cost can be extremely modest, or as you can see here, you can spend up to $200,000 for a gut remodeling project. So there are 4 different ways to accomplish this. Number one, you can design the building yourself and hire a contractor to build it based on your verbal or written descriptions. Some people have the ability of actually doing the drawings themselves if they need to draw something. And that's what I would call the do-it-yourself design. And of course, you're always, in a sense, you're always doing the design yourself because you're intrinsically involved in all the steps along the way through the design process. The second possibility of building something is to hire an architect to prepare the drawings and specifications for your approval, and then bid to several contractors. And I always recommend bidding to 2 or 3 general contractors. And that process is known as design, bid, build. And that's very traditional. That's the way that Frank Lloyd Wright did it. That's the way that most architects have done it for years and years and years. In recent times, though, there has been a kind of an expansion of that with the third possibility, which is to hire a contractor first, who then in turn hires an architect. And that process is called design build. You find a lot of warehouse type buildings done in this way. You have a loyalty more to the contractor than you do to the architect, because the architect is not your employee, it's the contractor's employee. It's one way of keeping the design within the budget that you have by hiring the contractor first. You tell the contractor, you absolutely can't go over this number. I don't care what it takes to get there, but this is what I need and this is my budget. So that's, at least in most people's minds, that's a way of controlling the budget a little better, or a little easier. And the fourth possibility is to hire an architect and a contractor separately, two simultaneous hires at the beginning of the project and have them work together. And that's called a construction management process. That's not done in residential work very much, but it is done quite a lot in office building and large scale construction. In fact, it's almost the norm these days to get both of the builder and the designer working simultaneously together. It's a way of controlling the cost a little easier as well. So those are the 4 possibilities of how to go about building a project. Now, when you hire the design consultant, there are a number of different hats that design consultant would wear. And of course, the first one on the list here is the architect. And the architect can do, for the most part, on simple projects, can do most of these jobs. But as the project gets much more complex, you probably want additional expertise to come into play. So the architect might hire a separate person to delineate the project, that is, to do a 3-dimensional rendering to show you what it looked like, what the project would look like. Many times the architect has that capability himself or herself, or has the capability within their office to delineate and do a 3-dimensional rendering of your design, of the design that is being proposed. The architect might either build a model or hire a model builder to do that. On some of my projects, which involve a lot of complexity, I typically hire a model builder to come in and take the design and convert it to a 3-dimensional physical model, cardboard model that can be looked at and taken apart and put back together again. It's a great way of designing buildings that are complicated. Because we want to control the costs throughout the project, many times an architect will hire a cost estimator or hire a contractor, a responsible and kind of friendly contractor that the architect has worked with in the past, to do a cost estimate at various stages along the way. And this could be a design stage or the construction document stage, or even prior to the actual construction itself, or prior to actual bidding. You could hire a cost estimator to make sure that your design that you have arrived at can be built within your budget. Item number 5, a historian. You might say, well, why do you need a historian? Well, you might need somebody with a background in doing research to find out about the historic qualities of your building. Now, as I say, many architects have that capability already that you can take advantage of, but not all do. And so you may want somebody who is skilled at that specialty, to find out about when your building was built originally and what are the key qualities of that building that you want to preserve. You would need to do that if you're applying for any kind of tax assessment freeze through the state. For example, you would need a historian to find out about the history of your house. You may need a surveyor, although not always. You certainly need what they call a plat of survey, which is a drawing that shows the boundaries of your lot. That would be submitted along with the drawings to the building department so that they know that you're not building outside of the limitations that the zoning ordinance will set. Surveyor, if you have a lot that has some topography, some changes of level, you definitely would need a surveyor to determine exactly what those level changes are, so you can design your addition or your new building to comply with the topography, make sure that your stormwater is draining properly. So then the next specialty would be a soil testing company, and I always, well, I shouldn't say always, many times in large house additions, I would recommend hiring a soil testing company to do at least 2 soil borings. They drill down, when they do their soil tests, they drill down about 15 feet deep, and they can determine what the makeup of the soil is, so you know how to design the foundations for your addition or your new building. They also will tell you where the water table level of the water would be, so that you know how deep you can build a basement if you want to build a basement. Or if you decide you want to build a basement deeper than the water table, you would know how to go about waterproofing that basement. So a soil testing company, it's not required by the building department, but it is something that I would recommend. And the cost is relatively reasonable, you know, for getting that information. Once you start digging a foundation and you find out that you're down below the water table, the cost of redesign at that point would be much greater than anything that you would spend on having that information up front. A civil engineer is an engineering specialty that would determine any kind of utilities that would be required for the house outside of the house, not inside, but they would design the water system, water pipes coming in, and the sewers going out, and the electrical wires that would come into the house. Anything outside would be determined by a civil engineer. Now, many times an architect has that skill, so you wouldn't need to hire a separate one, but in a complex project, you might. The structural engineer, many times, almost always, in my projects, I would engage the knowledge of a structural engineer to be able to determine size of footings, size of beams and joists, and rafters and all of that, just to make sure that we're in compliance with the building code and we're doing the best design we can for the structure of the project. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineer, you might need that, especially if you're going with a geothermal type of heating and air conditioning system. You would certainly need a mechanical engineer. For complex electrical and plumbing systems, you would need to have that knowledge of it as well. If you're trying to make the greenest building possible or the greenest addition possible, you may need to get sustainability specialist on board who would make recommendations in terms of materials and processes for saving energy. Telecommunications engineers specialize in not just telephone, but also in computer and any kind of sound systems that you might have hooked up within the house. Acousticians would determine ways of not transferring sound from either the outside to the inside or from between rooms, and they would determine ways of damping down sound that might be annoying inside the house, like in a dining room or something where you might have a lot of reverberation that you want to minimize. Kitchen designers are extremely skilled at knowing all of the products and various appliances that are available today on the market for kitchen designs. And I would recommend that they be engaged if you're doing a kitchen remodeling project. An interior designer or interior decorator, either one might be involved in assisting you in the decor. And the landscape architect also would be somebody that you would possibly want to hire as a consultant for the exterior of the house. And then finally, an attorney who you want to review your contracts with the various parties. So that's step one, hire the consultants. Now, what is the architect's role in a residential project? The architect would hire and coordinate all the required consultants, and usually that's done, typically hiring all those consultants that are necessary is done within the fee that the architect would quote you. The architect would analyze the zoning and building codes, make the drawings and or models to study the design, estimate the cost of construction, bid out the construction documents to, as I said, to at least 3 general contractors, meet with the village and plan examiners to submit the documents for a permit, prepare the contract for construction once you decided which contractor you wanted to use, administer the construction contract, review shop drawings. Shop drawings are drawings that are created by the general contractor or the subcontractors during construction that would show the details of how things fit together. The architect would visit the site during construction, usually on a weekly basis, and then certify pay requests from the contractor, also on a monthly basis typically. Review and recommend any change orders that might be necessary. Prepare a punch list, which is a list of those things that are still needing to be finished before the end of the project, and finally issue a certificate of substantial completion, which is incorporates the punch list and a cost estimate of what it needs to be finished. In the design process, this is step 2, create a list of the functions you need, give idea pictures to your architect, things that you like, discuss your requirements, likes and dislikes in detail. The architect will prepare a rough sketch for several design options. You want to tell him or her what you like or dislike about each, and then he or she will make the changes and make more detailed drawings. They may build a small cardboard model or do a 3D sketch showing what it looks like. Discuss the design again with the architect and until you're satisfied and you get what you need. Finally, agree to the design, and together you and your architect will pick out materials to specify. The architect will then create the drawings and specs for the bidding and the permit process. So the bidding, there are 4 ways to bid a project. You can hire a general contractor with a lump sum bid. You can hire a general contractor on a time and material cost basis. In other words, they would charge X number of dollars per hour for their trades and how much for the materials that go into it. And that would be a separate type of contract. You could hire a general contractor based on a guaranteed maximum price bid, and this would be done under the construction management style of working, where the general contractor would say, well, we don't know all the details yet, but we know from the basis of our experience that it's going to cost X number of dollars to complete this, and they typically would stick to that. And then you could also hire separate contractors, trade contractors, like you would hire a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, a mason, so on and so forth, and you would have to then coordinate all those various trades. I always recommend competitive bidding to at least 3 to 5 general contractors. I wouldn't go any higher than 5, just because it gets to the point where the contractors aren't interested in bidding anymore if you get 5 contractors bidding on a project, 5 or more. The step 4 is then obtain permits. And that process here in Oak Park is, if you're in the historic district, you would need to go to the Historic Preservation Commission for what they call a certificate of appropriateness. And to do that, you would rely on the architect again to make sure that they're complying with the standards of the Historic Preservation Commission. If you go for a tax assessment freeze from the state, then you need to get the state's approval on that. That's through the state architect. If you're demolishing a garage or something, you have to get a county demolition permit. If there's any hazardous materials in the demolition area, you need to get a hazardous materials abatement permit from the county again. You need to get zoning approval, and finally you need to get the building permit itself. And then step 5 is financing, either with your cash or with a bank loan. Contractors will typically ask for an initial payment of a third of the contract amount up front. Sometimes they even ask for more than that. I do not recommend this. Payment to the contractor should be made periodically, once a month, or sometimes if it's agreed to, you could do it twice a month upon completion of every portion of the work that they finish. The work being billed should be approved by you, certified by your architect, or the bank before payment. There should be a 10% retainage held back on each periodic payment to be paid upon final completion. So the contractor's role is to hire and coordinate the trades, schedule the project, construct the project based on the construction documents, to do quality control during construction, make sure that the construction site is safe, schedule the village inspections, correct all deficiencies that come up during the construction, prepare periodic pay requests, pay its subcontractors, very important, and complete the project and prepare the final pay requests and correct any deficient work within the warranty period, which is usually a year. During the construction, you would, or to start the construction, you would sign the contract with the contractor or contractors, obtain the permits, receive the contractor's certificate of insurance. Contractor then schedules the work. You would have weekly meetings with the team, and that includes you and the contractor and your architect, and any other specially designed person that might be working on the project. Approve the pay requests and pay the contractor on a periodic basis. Request and approve change orders, make the punch list, get the guarantees and the maintenance manuals, do the final inspection and approval by the village, approval by the bank if they are financing. Usually the bank wants to get involved in the final approvals, close out the project, and then make the final payment to the contractor. So after construction, enjoy, take pictures and bury a time capsule. I always recommend that, because you never know, somebody might want to be interested in knowing what was done 50 years before. Keep all records of the project in a safe place, and then begin the maintenance. Have the architect and contractor come back after a year to make what is known as a post-occupancy evaluation. So questions. It's about 10 to 5, and if there are any questions now, you can ask.
Frank, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
What do design consultants generally cost?
That's what my number 2 question is here.
Yes.
Like people ask, what does it cost to build first? Design consultants, many of them will give you an hourly rate, which varies from, I don't know, let's say $80 an hour to $150 an hour, something like that. There is no set fee. I can tell you what many architects charge, which is about 10% of the construction cost, and that would include all of the various sub-consultants that they would need, the engineers and you know, people that might do the delineation and do the models and that sort of thing. That would include that and include their involvement during the construction phase as well. So that gives you a kind of a general idea. That's variable though, and again, there's no fixed number on that. If you do a search online, you'll see that it varies from 10 to 15%. I know for houses, because they're so time intensive and labor intensive, houses usually are charged at a higher fee rate than other projects are. So going back to the number 1 question, how much does it cost to build? I always say to my clients, I said, you know, for house additions, it would cost somewhere between $200 and $250 a square foot. So on a typical, let's say a 20 by 20 square foot family room addition, you're talking about 400 times about what is that? 400 square feet times $200. That would be, can't do the calculation in my head.
80,000.
80,000. Okay. That doesn't, you know, it varies so much depending on what kind of details are involved, what kind of
finishes,
finishes, certainly all those things come into play, whether it's a brick addition or a frame addition. You know, it can vary. I would say a good number to hang their hat on would be about $250 a square foot for a typical family room addition.
And Frank, with the design consultant, when do they usually expect to get paid?
At different phases along the way. So there's a design phase, and usually they charge about 10% for the design phase. There's a design development phase, and they'd be looking for another 15% of the total fee at that stage. The construction document phase, which gets you ready to bid and get a permit. Most architects would charge 50% of their total fee. So let's say the architect's fee is, I don't know, $8,000 using our $80,000 family room. So for $8,000, they'd be looking for $800 for the design phase, maybe $1,200 for the design development phase, and $4,000 for the construction document phase. Then that last 25% would be billed during construction, probably at the end of the construction phase.
Okay, we have a question here from one of our attendees. Does your firm typically use standard contracts published by national organizations like AIA, CSI, or BIA, or do you use customized contracts you have generated with local council's guidance based upon your many years of experience?
Yeah, I always use AIA contracts. My insurance company requires that, and I think any architect that has professional liability insurance, they are forced to do that. Otherwise, they lose a. If there's any claims, the professional.
They won't back them. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, Frank, thank you so much. That was incredibly informative. Very well thought out.
I have one more.
Oh, sure.
Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
This is called a funk chart. Was created by Anne McCutcheon Lewis. She's the daughter of, or the granddaughter of the famous cartoonist for the Sun-Times, John McCutcheon. But here you can see at the various stages along the way, the owner and the architect start at a high level of, you might say, through the design, then it goes down a little bit, bounces back up, and then the bids come in and it goes way down here. And then there's a period of stewing, I guess, and then it begins the demolition. Everybody's happy during the demolition. The roof deck drops down. So the contractor starts at a kind of a mid-level range here, dropping down at the rough end and then back up again. And eventually you can see everybody comes to a high point at the end of the project. But you can see she also has determined that there's about a 9-month period here, and that's been my experience as well. From the beginning of design through construction, roughly it takes about 9 months for almost every project I've been involved with. It just takes time. Nothing can be done that quickly.
I love that. The funk
Family
chart.
dog drops down here and then comes back up again. Roaches and mice never come back, thank God.
Thank God.
And the children bounce around naturally.
All right, Frank, thank you so much.
Okay.
Really appreciate it.